This week on the Pro Wrestling Podcast. More allegations come out towards Vince McMahon. Chris Jericho has a major health scare. Big sexy Kevin Nash is in the podcast game. And Alexa Bliss shoots on working with the Fiend. I'm your host, Seth Grimes, and this is the Pro Wrestling Podcast. What's up, guys? Welcome to the Pro Wrestling Podcast. I am your boy, Seth Grimes, and we are here with another huge week of content. Any big news break this week? Anything exciting going on that you want to talk about? Kind of a dull week, right? No major news breaking, nothing crazy happening in the world of WWE or anything like that. No, I didn't think so. Except for this first story here, as we have new allegations coming out from the Wall Street Journal that Vince McMahon has been paying off quite a few other women for their sexual favors. This was a story that has been piggybacked off of a couple weeks ago when the Wall Street Journal were the ones that had broke the original story that Vince McMahon was fucking around with a paralegal, and then he signed a non-disclosure agreement and paid her out $1 million, what was it, $3 million for that first one, to shut the fuck up and go away. And during that investigation, it was noted right off the bat, I don't know if it was in the Wall Street Journal or if it was noted by the WWE board, the investigation team that they hired to do an internal investigation, that there were other non-disclosure agreements that were dug up during the research of this previous non-disclosure. So we kind of knew that this was a to-be-continued story. And of course, it didn't take very long for the Wall Street Journal to dig up more information on those other non-disclosure agreements. Instead of me rambling it all to you, why don't you go ahead and take a look at this clip that's going to kind of break down some of these new details for you, and then I'll catch you on the backside.
The Wall Street Journal published a news story written by Joe Palazzolo, Ted Mann, and Joe Flint, uncovering new information about previously unreported settlements by World Wrestling Entertainment owner and CEO Vince McMahon to at least 4 women who have alleged sexual misconduct against the company's chairman. The total amount paid out over the last 16 years has totaled over $12 million and are part of non-disclosure agreements that the 4 women signed and prevent them from discussing or pursuing legal claims against the now 76-year-old McMahon. The Journal notes that it has reviewed documents as well as spoken to people who are familiar with the matter. The biggest bombshells coming out of today's reporting include the report of a $7.5 million settlement with a former wrestler who alleges that McMahon, quote, coerced her into giving him oral sex and then demoted her and ultimately declined ultimately declined to renew her contract in 2005 after she resisted further sexual encounters.
Well, I'll be damned, right? Like, who saw that one coming? Vince McMahon, more dirt in his background, more allegations, more non-disclosure agreements for sexual misconduct, blackmailing, perhaps. Again, this was hinted towards in the initial story that there were more non-disclosure agreements that were dug up. So it was only a matter of time before we got more details and more dirt on all this, but man, it keeps getting worse for Vince McMahon, doesn't it? And he keeps doubling down. This motherfucker, we have not seen so much of Vince McMahon in 20 years. This guy's on the fucking UFC now. He's sitting fucking in the crowd of a UFC. Since when has Vince McMahon ever went and sat in the crowd of anything, ever? I don't even think this guy will go to the fucking opera. He's a man of work. He sits in the gorilla position or in his office in front of that big giant dinosaur head. And that's all he does. That's Vince McMahon. Apparently, it's not all he does, though. Apparently, he also gets his dick sucked by WWE divas. One of the more prominent allegations seems to come from an actual wrestler, a contracted wrestler. Vince been doing this shit since the 80s, right? He's been using his power to get what he wants out of these women and using them for blackmail, perhaps. Maybe it's, maybe they are consenting in the whole thing. There's nothing in the story with that paralegal, this first story, that came out a couple weeks ago. There's nothing in that story that hinted at any kind of non-consent or blackmail or bribery or, using sexual favor to gain advancement, even though clearly, that person did gain quite a bit of advancement. More details came out on that too, which we'll jump to in a moment, but one of them happened to be a wrestler. There was enough details provided in that story without actually naming the female wrestling talent that I have a pretty damn good idea who it is, and just by browsing Twitter, I think a lot of you have a pretty good idea of who that is. Now, I don't think it's fair to speculate or name drop. There was a non-disclosure agreement. People's privacy is very important, so I don't know that any of that needs to be said, but if you know, right? It's kind of obvious the way the story was a talent that was released in 2005. It was a talent that was demoted prior to being released. So they were a wrestler and then they were demoted down to something else or, a lesser role to a certain extent after they didn't want to play ball. To even further back this up, this talent, there were some tweets dug up from this talent that kind of indicated that it matched up very well. Like her reason for leaving WWE matched up very closely to the story that's coming out now. But I will leave it there as far as the details on that person. You know who it is. But let's just give her privacy. But dang, right? That's not good. There was some definite coercion. He was trying to get her to do stuff. Coercion. That's what it is. Coercion. Sounds weird, but that's a real word, I believe. So he was coercing this talent, perhaps, saying, you give daddy a little something, and daddy will take care of you. God damn it! You suck my dick, god damn it! Or you're fired. That's in poor taste. I should cut that, but I'm not going to. Fuck you guys. It's not looking good for Vince, and I don't know that he's going to be able to just keep coming out on Monday Night Raw and SmackDown. There were other women as well, or other situations that came out. There was one noted as a manager that I don't know, it was not clear. Actually, Sean Ross Sapp did say on one of his shows that he is reaching out to the Wall Street Journal to clarify if this was a wrestling manager, like a valet or some shit, or if this was somebody in a management position behind the scenes. Either way, and also, according to Meltzer, this appears to be all of the dirt that they've dug up from now. Like when they were talking about, there appears to be other non-disclosure agreements in Vince's history on file. Those appear to be those non-disclosure agreements. So at this time, I don't think there will be more that come out unless this becomes like a Me Too movement again. And, everybody comes out of the woodwork. Every girl that Vince has ever winked at starts coming out and saying that they were sexually harassed and whatnot. it's I don't it's a bad situation all around. It's bad for Vince. Um, Despite all of Vince's nefariousness and all of his dirty scumbaggery, um, I still don't want to see Vince go out like this, of his entire career, everything he's accomplished. I hate to see him, the history books be like, yeah, but then he, you know, diddled a bunch of chicks that he worked with and blackmailed them and stuff like that. So that's a big stain on his, it's a big black mark on his record. This first story that broke with this paralegal, he almost seemed proud of that, like as long as they could prove, which I'm sure Jerry McDevitt, being a fantastic attorney that he is, would be able to fight that and somehow be able to show that that didn't really have much to do with WWE and that her raise didn't have much to do with WWE. She was moved from one department to another. So apparently Vince did try to get her more money. So I do think the amount that she was paid and like the big jump was because, Vince was fucking her and had a thing for her and just wanted to see her do good, right? Wanted to help a brother out. But also, if they can prove that there was some sort of you do this for me and I'll do that for you, then that could be a little bit shady, This is just a bad situation. Vince is gonna go out. This isn't good for Vince. He's not gonna be able to keep going out on TV. He's not gonna be able to keep no selling this and trying to just push through it. Apparently, Sean Ross Sapp had also reported that first night that Vince came out on was SmackDown first, before the Raw. He came out on SmackDown right after the allegations. As soon as he came back to the locker room in the gorilla position, he just said, "Fuck him." And, he's just defiant to the very end, and I respect that to a certain extent. If he's fucking some bitch from his apartment complex and he gets her a job because he's got a crush on her and he's in a position to do so, and then he's done with her and he wants to pass her off to fucking Laurinaitis and hook her up with a fat payday on her way out, it's scumbaggy. It's scummy to a certain extent. It's dirty. But it's not illegal or criminal or, inherent unless more details come out. It's just kind of scummy. It's just Vince being a dirty old man, right? But, if he's demoting women because they will no longer do favors for him, with that diva, for example, if apparently in that story she did blow him at least once, she sucked him off and then was like, I don't really want any more of that dirty old dick of yours. And he's like, okay, well, then I guess you can, go down to, well, we won't say exactly what happened because that'll kind of point in the direction of who it is, but, it's not good, and I know a lot of people are starting to really hate on Vince, and he's got a bad image on him right now. There's speculation that the TV networks may come into play at some point, because ultimately Vince doesn't have to. It's going to be very hard to just fire Vince. He can technically be removed from his own company, but the board of the directors are going to have to make that happen. And the board of directors are made up of people that Vince appointed. Vince personally put them on the board. This is Nick Khan. This is Stephanie McMahon. This is fucking Kevin Dunn's on the board. I don't know if Triple H is or not, but I mean, these are people that are not going to oust Vince McMahon. And even if they do, Vince still is the majority shareholder in the, they got like two different kinds of stocks, like petty stocks and then like power stocks, and he owns the majority of the power stocks, so he still has the majority voting rights, like 80% voting right of the company. So if they were to push him out, what he would do then is when the board seats come up, he could theoretically just kick them off of their board and then replace them with people that will hire him back on as the chairman and CEO. So Vince probably is not going to leave unless he steps down on his own. And at that point, I think it's because he's already proven he's a stubborn motherfucker. Not just through, the whole history of his career and wrestling stuff, but even in this case, just trying to make himself appear publicly every chance that he gets to show that he's not shook by this and he's not going to hide. And fuck you, I'm Vince McMahon, damn it. He's going to have that fucking defiant energy to the very end. And I think if he were to step down, it's going to have to come from like a TV network. Like, USA or Fox are going to have to step in and be like, bro, we're not going to renew your contract unless it's going to it'll have to be something that's going to kill the business unless Vince steps down and then he decides, okay, fine, I'll go away. But even then, it's kind of reported that he's not. He hasn't been doing the running the business in a long time anyway. Nick Khan's been handling a lot of the day-to-day business dealings, and then Vince has just been doing the creative. He's the creative guy, and that's what's important to him. Everything that you see on TV is still goes through Vince. He's still the last stop. So I don't know how this will all play out, but it's certainly starting to take a very bad turn for Vince. I don't know if more people will come out in like a Me Too-esque situation, but it's what else are you going to do, man? It'll be interesting to see if Vince still appears on TV, if he's still going to be that defiant guy and just come out with his big swinging dick around and fucking ignore it and no sell it, or if this is going to be enough to make Vince kind of crawl in his hole now and go hide. Again, it's sad. I don't want to see him go down like that, but we could definitely be looking at the end of Vince McMahon. Time will tell. This story is just breaking, so how it plays out will remain to be seen in the WWE's board investigation and all of that. But do not be surprised if Vince has to step down. Go away, but also on the flip side, don't be surprised if Vince just no-sells the shit out of this and just powers through it and just fucking pushes on and sits at the head of the gorilla table with an iron fist. So we shall see. I'll continue to follow it, but until then, we're moving on to the next. Chris Jericho had a major health scare earlier this year as he opened up on the Talk is Jericho podcast, talking all about his major health scare that he had. He had blood clots in his lungs. It's called a pulmonary embolism. Apparently, this is the same thing that Rowdy Roddy Piper died from. So definitely serious shit. It is life-threatening. Apparently Jericho was out on tour overseas, over in England, and started becoming very short of breath on stage. And take a listen to this clip from Chris Jericho as he kind of breaks down a little bit more detail of what happened.
So in Chester, I was really feeling like this is terrible. I can't breathe. There's a door right by the stage that leads to the outside. And I said, I'm just going to walk off stage. I can't take it. But I finished the show. I was talking to my doctor at home in Tampa who said, this could be blood clots. You could have some blood clots. And then my doctor said, you have to go to the hospital now. About an hour later, I get a call from Dr. Hatim who said, you have blood clots. We can tell by the blood that we drew. You have to go directly to the hospital. Now, pretty scary. Now, keep in mind, I'm in London. I'm thousands of miles away from home in a foreign country, and now I have to go to a hospital.
Yeah, that's scary shit. Chris Jericho was, I don't know if he was that close to dying, but maybe that close, right? People die from that shit. But I guess, people die from fucking appendicitis and that kind of shit too. So, but definitely a serious health risk. He was hospitalized. He was close to being put on a ventilator at some point. And, he had mentioned in the podcast that scared the shit out of him because, especially through the COVID period, a lot of people that were put on ventilators, that was it. That was the last time that they were alive. Much like Brody Lee. Brody Lee was on a ventilator right before he died. So scary shit. Jericho was fearing for his life. He goes in depth in the whole podcast is him just telling his story from, when he noticed something was wrong all the way to getting back on his feet. He addresses his weight issues. He talks about how he purposely put on weight to be bigger in Japan, bulkier. I don't know. I mean, he did. Because when he went over to Japan, he was significantly bulked up. And as he describes it, he just didn't really think much about it. He just never lost the weight and just kind of kept going as is. But while he was going through this blood clot situation, he went and had all of his other medical stuff that he's been putting off checked out. And he found out he was too fat. Surprise, surprise. The internet could have told him so. He addresses that, actually. And hey, I'm not judging. I mean, right? So I'm sure, most of you listening are fat fucks. So we're wrestling fans, right? We're fat schlubs in our mom's basements, right? Hating on everything. You stupid. That's the stereotype. So no judgment on Jericho's weight, but certainly, he got himself in tremendous shape. Apparently he went to like an actual fat loss clinic and got it done professionally, and he looks like a fucking $1,000,000, just chiseled for his age. But it's scary that all of this happened off radar. And he had mentioned, I don't know where this ever came out, actually. I must have missed wherever this was talked about, but he said Tony Khan kind of accidentally leaked it, like he mentioned it or something, and it wasn't necessarily intended to get out. Or Jericho said maybe he was going to at some point, but once Tony mentioned it, he decided it was kind of time. Probably in a press conference or something, I'm sure. But Jericho decided, it was time to tell the story. And all this was happening. All of us just saw fat Jericho. And we're just like, Jericho's a fat, lazy fuck nowadays. Can barely move in the ring. And he's slower. And he's showing his age. And he just needs to wrap it up. And this just kind of goes to show that you never fucking know what's going on with people. Right? And this can translate to any number of things, Don't take things to heart and don't assume anything with people. You don't know unless you know. Certainly it's easy to judge and be like, oh, Jericho is fat and looks like shit and he's slow and blah, 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 blah. And we all did it. We all made that judgment. But I'm just saying, I guess this is a good way to kind of realize that there could be more going on that we don't. There's more to it than meets the eye. You know what I mean? So Jericho was in a very serious health condition. Well, I shouldn't say that, because that's not what caused his fatness. That's just what caused his recovery. So, but even just being slower and out of breath, and he said he had to kind of, like the match that he worked with Santana and Ortiz, where they just never tagged him in, was designed that way on purpose so that he could still be on TV but not physically have to work. And he still has to be on blood thinners and all that to this day so that he doesn't get reoccurring blood clots. And that shit's scary because those can travel up to the brain and cause issues there. They can travel to the heart. Anytime it's in the lung area, man, that shit can just spread. There's so many veins coming in and out. So, very scary. And he must have felt pretty alone just being overseas, too, But apparently money, he talks about he basically had like private doctors and medical concierge services and all this shit, the best medical treatment money can buy. But it's good to hear that Jericho, he said he's 100% now, clean bill of health. and that there's nothing, pressing anymore, that he just needs to kind of watch his weight and take his blood thinners and all that shit. But scary shit, man. And you never know. And Jericho's very, I'll just kind of leave it like this. Jericho's a very lively, he's a very alive person, right? Like he's a presence. He's very with it. And he's very in your face sometimes. And like, just to think about, like, he could just be gone. Just gone. Like, no signs of, like, oh, Jericho's really kind of, old man Jericho's slowing down and he doesn't seem with it as much anymore. That kind of stuff. But he's like, no, he's just fucking firing on all cylinders, right there with us, doing all these podcasts, and easily could have been gone in, like, an overnight. And we'd be talking about Chris Jericho's sudden passing. So cherish people, man. Not just, our entertainers, but people in your life and stuff. Shit happens quick. And also just be aware that you don't always know what's going on, and not to judge too much. But anyways, I'm going to wrap this up here. But props to Jericho. Go listen to that full podcast. Get the full scoop. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next. After her return to the WWE, Alexa Bliss is now out doing the interview circuit. She was on Out of Character with Ryan Satin this week, talking all about her return to the WWE, her time off, her fucking fabulous wedding where she's fucking up doing bye 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 with NSYNC and shit. But it was this clip in particular where she's talking about working with the Fiend and doing the whole Dark Alexa, the evil Alexa Bliss character, and the Lily doll and all that. Interesting shit here. What was Alexa Bliss's take on this whole situation? What did she really think about working with the Fiend? Check out this clip.
Your character went through a pretty wild story arc for a year involving the Fiend. Looking back on it now, how do you feel about the way it all played out?
Oh my gosh. Working with the Fiend, with Wyndham, was the most fun I've ever had in my entire WWE career. He is so brilliant. It's very sad that we don't work together anymore because it was so much fun, and I think the WWE Universe saw how much fun we were having. It's definitely a moment in my career that I will cherish the most, because that was the most fun I've ever had. And I got to have a match against Randy Orton and beat him.
Yes, you technically did have a match against Randy Orton, beat him. That is true.
I made stuff fall from the sky. You know what I mean? Like, that was cool. I made fire come out of my hands. Like, it was so cool.
She fucking loved it. Of course she loved it. Alexa Bliss is a horror geek. She loves to, she always does like the cosplay with the horror characters. She's got, Freddy Krueger at least, we've seen that a number of times. I believe she said in other interviews, she was on the Dead Meat podcast a couple years ago, where they talked about her favorite horror movie and stuff. So she's a horror chick. She's into the scary movie stuff. And she even said in this interview that she prefers to play a character, that she's kind of treading new territory right now, because the character we see on TV currently is almost just exactly Alexa Bliss. There's no character to it, the personality that she's showing is basically who she is, not even really turned up to 11. It's just Alexa Bliss on TV, which is ultimately, as a wrestler, that's where you want to end up. Characters are fun to play, but once you can get into your own skin where you can just be yourself naturally, that's a great place to be as a character. But Alexa Bliss likes playing the character. She's more comfortable jumping into somebody else's skin or pretending to be something else. And she said, this is the only time in her career currently now with her return that she is not playing a character. That even when she was, Alexa Bliss, the Twisted Bliss, just evil princess, or the pixie girl or whatever. All of those were just different characters, different twists on who she is as a person. But the horror character, and she was asked too, there was a lot of hate on the internet for that character, especially when she was doing all the hokey phooey stuff, the magical powers and shit like that. And she came out of a box-shaped structure. If I was Ryan Satin, I would have asked what the difference was between a box and a box-shaped structure. That's an important question that I feel like he left on the table there. But, she got a lot of flack online for it, but she didn't give a shit because she was having fun. And that's part of it, too. I'm not going to knock her for that, she fucking having fun, dude. Like, she said that was the absolute greatest time of her entire career. And, when you're having that much fun, fuck what the fans think. You know what I mean? Like, she's getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, even if not $1 million at this point, a year, just to fucking play a horror character on TV. You know what I mean? And, she talks about it. It was in that clip, I believe, where she's like, I get to pin Randy Orton, I get to wrestle Randy Orton and beat him, she seems like a cool chick. She did talk about she was very boring. She does come across a little dry at times, but she's an awkward person to a certain extent. I think she suffers a lot of social anxiety and that kind of stuff, which I do too, actually. So I relate to that. I'm not judging it or nothing, but it does make her awkward, as a lot of people are. So there was a little bit of that came through in the interview too. It was fun. It was an interesting look into Alexa Bliss, especially now that we get to talk about all that Bray Wyatt stuff, because when Ryan had mentioned too, when she was in that character, he was dying to talk to her, but he didn't want to fuck up the gimmick, you know what I mean? But now that it's over with, we can kind of talk about it. Same with the Undertaker, now that he's retired, now we can kind of get into the mystique of the Undertaker a little bit without having to try to keep kayfabe still. But it was a great interview. I highly recommend you go check that out. You can probably find it on YouTube, any podcast app that you're whatever. It's going to be Out of Character with Ryan Satin. Great interview with Alexa Bliss. Go check that out. And while you're checking that out, well, don't check that out right now. Actually, why don't you check out the next clip? We got a sneak peek this week of Big Sexy's new podcast. It is Click This with Kevin Nash and Sean Oliver. They put a little snippet of it up. There was a promo that they did with Conrad. I think this is in Conrad's network of his bajillion podcasts that he has by now. But then there's a clip up on YouTube now too. I did check my podcast feed. They have not put out a full podcast yet, but they did put out a sample of it at least, where Kevin Nash shoots on Jim Cornette. Check out this clip.
Because it wasn't going to affect.
Well, if you ask Jim Cornette, he'd fired everybody and find everybody, and that's what I'd done.
Because I'm just breaking kayfabe like a motherfucker as I sell my way to the corner. That's why the first hug, when you see that photograph, we're all in that fucking turnbuckle, because I was using the turnbuckle to keep myself up. We weren't trying to fucking destroy the business. We weren't trying to show everybody that it was if it would have been a work, I would have fucking jumped up and fucking done it. It's entertainment. I mean, he just before you open your mouth, look at it, and he will now. And I didn't like Cornette. I didn't.
When he was there, you mean?
Yeah, I didn't like Cornette. I didn't like him for until we got to TNA.
They should have called this the Big Sexy Podcast. Click this. It's a little meh for me. I'll get used to it, I'm sure, but it's a little weak. But the Big Sexy Podcast, because to me that kind of he's big sexy, so it's the Big Sexy Podcast. But it could also be the podcast is big and sexy. You know, it's a big, sexy podcast. So I like that. Maybe they'll change it. Just throwing that out there. You guys can have that one. No copyrights. You don't got to pay me nothing. Just smile at me. Tip the hat. You know what I'm saying? But no, I'm very excited that Kevin Nash is going to be doing a show. He's fun to listen to. He's another guy that's not going to... He's not going to sugarcoat shit. He don't give a fuck. He's not like a dick either. He's not going to just bury everybody, but he's not afraid to bury people if need be. Kevin Nash is a straight shooter, and he's got a unique perspective on the business because I feel like he loves wrestling, but he's not a mark for it by any stretch, you know? So he's not... He's got he's got a business sense to it. The Click was really good at that, and that's why even they meshed good with Hogan. It was kind of like an awkward pairing at first, you know, Hall, Nash, and Hogan, but it worked out really well because they all kind of have that same mentality of the wrestling business. They love it, they respect it, but they do see it as a business. Even though it's fun and they love it and they can watch wrestling matches and talk about wrestling all day, at the end of the day, it's a business to them first, and they're worried about the money. And that doesn't work for me, brother, and all that shit. And so I'm excited to see the kind of stuff that Kevin Nash can get into. I'm also excited to, Sean Oliver, get him back in the game. You know, we all should be familiar. If you're the kind of person watching this show, I'm sure you've watched all his shoot interviews that he used to do back in the day. He's like one of the godfathers of shoot interviews, you know, him and RF video and that kind of stuff. As far as the Jim Cornette clips, that's, the clip that I showed here where he's talking shit about Cornette a little bit. Rightfully so, you know, he deserves a shot back. You know, Cornette's not shy about talking shit about the Click on his podcast and that curtain call angle and what he would have did, you know. So it's fine that Nash gets his receipt. Like, it's wrestling. We're talking wrestling podcasts. You're sitting behind a microphone talking shit about people, you know. So Cornette gets his receipt here, and that's perfectly acceptable. And big sexy Kevin Nash, man. I'm pumped that he's got a show. Every wrestler and their mom's got a podcast now. It's such a flooded market. Dude, I can't, even when I search, man, I haven't gotten into William Regal's new show yet. I haven't been able to dive into that. There's only so much time in the day. And that's kind of partly the reason why I do this show, you know, is to kind of point you guys in the direction of some of the highlights, right? Like, God, there's a whole world of podcasts out there. So what should I be listening to if I'm behind or just don't even know where to start, or, you know, there's so much to pick from. Where do I want to put my time at? I do this show to kind of point you in the direction of some fun stories that I think you guys will like. But this one, I think I'm going to try to listen to quite a bit, the Kevin Nash podcast here, both for Nash and Sean Oliver. Sean Oliver is great. If you're not familiar with who he is, look him up on YouTube. He does fantastic interviews, and he's done them with damn near everybody in the business. And he has worked with Kevin before, so there's a good rapport there. And we can tell already that Kevin's he's gonna be blunt. He's gonna put his shit out there, you know. He's gonna flap his balls on the desk and be like, "What, bitch? I'm in the house now." The Big Sexy Podcast. That's what it needs to be. Matter of fact, I'm going to refer to it as the Big Sexy Podcast from here on out. I will not call it Click This. I will say Kevin Nash said on the Big Sexy Podcast. But that's it. Go check out that clip if you haven't yet, and then keep an eye out. I didn't catch any kind of date or anything. I probably could have looked on, read something or whatnot on their podcast feed. But I would expect it to come out, this week probably, or very soon. So keep an eye out for that and give it a listen. Big Sexy. Woo! I don't know why I said woo. He doesn't woo. He does this, but he doesn't woo. He does a... Well, Jim Ross has found himself on a little bit of a switch up on the commentary team. He talked about it a little bit on his podcast this week. We saw when I was in Detroit for Rampage, for Dynamite and Rampage. Taz was on commentary for Dynamite. JR came out for the main event. Then he stuck around to do Rampage. And apparently it's been announced now that JR is officially switching over to Rampage full-time. And as their commentator, and Taz is going to be on the Dynamite team. And this is a Dynamite move, pun intended. But JR gets into it. We'll talk a little bit more about it on the back end. But first, listen to this clip. JR kind of addresses, I think this was before the Rampage move was addressed, but JR does talk about on his podcast coming out for just the main event and what his thoughts were on that and how Tony Khan uses him. Check out this clip.
Tony Khan brought me out to do the main events at the end of the show. I think I did like an hour and a half or something. And that was different for me. It's just starting. I was coming in long relief as a baseball player, so to speak. And I did the same thing on Raw then this week or last week. So I don't know if that's just a Tony thing or that's what how he's going to use me. I don't know. Doesn't matter. So happy for AEW. I'm glad I'm working there. I appreciate Tony Khan's confidence in me, but
yeah, Jim Ross seems fine with however Tony decides he wants to play him, and it sounds like he wants to play him on Rampage. I don't know how that'll work on pay-per-views or even on Dynamite, if he will still come out and do the main events for Dynamite. I like the idea. That seems to be going over well on the internet, the idea of JR coming out for the main event. This kind of reminds me a little bit of, well, first remember he did it. He has done that at a couple WrestleManias, so there's precedent there just for Jim Ross. But also it reminds me a little bit of like, remember when Bruce Buffer used to come out, or was it Michael Buffer? I don't remember. There's the two of them. But the one that would come out on Nitro for the main event, just the announcer to do like the mega fucking super announcements, and I like the idea of the main event having a main event something or other. It could be a main event ring announcer, a main event referee, a main event commentary team, something that like an extra, it's time for the main event and then fireworks go off, something to like, you're in the main event, motherfucker. This is extra special, and we're doing this extra special thing. So I actually like JR on commentary for the main event, but him also on Rampage. This is a great move because Taz is better than JR. JR is great. I love Jim Ross. I respect Jim Ross. I respect the man. But he's a grumpy old fucker, and he's stubborn, and he doesn't like the new, on this episode, actually, he was talking with Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff was the guest host, which go out of your way to listen to this one. They were talking about Hulk Hogan in the WWE and, from JR's perspective as like talent relations and that kind of stuff. So it's very interesting. Plus, just that Eric Bischoff is the host. He's the Conrad. He's the, whatever the other guy's name is that always fills in and does the grilling JR. Is it Paul Bromwell? Or does he do a different one? I don't fucking know. It doesn't matter. But it was fun. It was cool to listen to. JR seems to be cool with whatever, but is he cool with whatever? Look, he's too stubborn. He doesn't like where I was going with that. He was talking with Bischoff about like something they're discussing how you change with the business or whatever, and he says that he's not, he doesn't, judge the way the business changes or whatever. And I called bullshit on that. I can't remember his exact wording, but something like he was able to just keep rolling and keep up with the times. And I call bullshit on that because, even Tony Khan came out and said in like a backstage production meeting early on in AEW that Jim Ross was very critical of Orange Cassidy, very outspoken and going, what the fuck are we doing with this guy? It's a joke. Cornette says little dog pockets, so JR has a tendency, and you know what? He's entitled to his opinion, But he not only signed a contract, he re-signed a contract. So he's like, I still want to work here, you know? It wasn't like, this isn't for me, you know, I'm just going to do my bit and then get the fuck out. He's still, you know, he re-signed a contract. So he wants to be there, but he doesn't like any of the wrestling. He likes like I'm sure he likes a Bryan Danielson match or a Punk match or an FTR match. But when you put like goofy shit like Danhausen or Orange Cassidy in front of him, or, you know, Tope Suicida flippy floppies, Jim Ross is going to have a goddamn fucking aneurysm out there, and he can't help, you know, but he can feel any way he wants about the product. But when you're a commentator, it's your fucking job to put over the wrestling product. Okay? He's not there to talk on screen to be critical of the guys. Well, why don't you stop fooling around and start worrying about winning the damn match? He's always got these little snide remarks about like the Tope Suicidas and fucking any kind of flippy floppy stuff, or he'll you know, like an Orange Cassidy, slightly unorthodox, folks, but it's you know, like he's gotta draw attention to what he perceives to be shortcomings, and sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But it's not his job to call shit out on live TV. He can do that backstage, and he's a valuable person to have around to do that. I would want him in all my production meetings, and I would want him to have a relationship with the talent where he can openly give them feedback on their match and on their presentation. But on commentary, he needs to cover that shit up, and he needs to put over the fucking talent. Now, I don't know if it's half that and the other half he's just getting old and tired and cranky and can't sit out there for 2 hours, 4 hours, 3 hours. So obviously this change was made for a reason, and I do think, at least if it was me, I would have checked Jim Ross right away, you know, in the most respectful way. Jim, you're burying the fucking talent on TV. Stop it. You know, say all that shit backstage. Tell them. It's important that they know, whether they listen to you or not, whether I listen to you or not. Tony Khan, you know what I mean? Like, I want, you know, I've said that with Jim Cornette too. I would love to have Jim Cornette on my booking team. Whether I listen to anything that he said ever or not, no matter how much he hated what I wanted to do, because I would keep an Orange Cassidy on roster. I'd keep a Danhausen on roster. So already he's not going to like that shit. But I want his opinion. And I want Jim Ross's opinion. And I like that. But I don't want it on fucking live TV when everybody listening at home could go, yeah. You know, even Jim Cornette will mention that on his podcast. You know, he'll get a kick out of JR, like, you know, like if there's a match that's... you know, weird or whatever, he'll say, "Oh, that's ugly, a little bit of bowling shoe ugly," or, you know, that's he's a unique character, you know, and that's his subtle way of being like, I don't get this fucking weirdo, and I don't endorse it, but whatever, I'm being paid to be here. So, it's a good move, and Taz is great. Taz, I didn't like Taz as much in WWE. But I did start to appreciate him more when he was in TNA. And now in AEW, like especially with Excalibur, they make a great pairing. Him and Excalibur could probably do it alone. Shivani's fine on commentary. I like Shivani. He doesn't do any good commentary, but he's a lovable personality. And I just want him there to go, oh my God, oh my. That's it. That's all I need out of him. But he could also just be the Mean Gene Okerlund. I think that's also a fan. I mean, that is his role in AEW, but he's also at the commentary table. You know, I think moving that to Taz and Excalibur with Tony Schiavone as your Mean Gene, and use him as a Mean Gene several times on the show. Do at least 2 or 3 interviews per show live in the arena. Well, you know, maybe even backstage, but live in the arena, on the stage, something like that, in the ring with Tony Schiavone. It's a good place for him. And Rampage is a good place for JR. Less time on the mic and, you know, less seen by people. Maybe he'll stop burying the talent a little bit. Who knows? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if JR has anything else to say about this. He seemed cool with whatever Tony wants to do with him. But we also know JR is very opinionated, and he had said that before he was moved to Rampage off of Dynamite. Which, by the way, his cognitive function, I think, might be in question a little bit, because he continually messes up people's names, and even during this podcast, which is easy to do. You get so used to saying Cesaro. See, I'm messing up my words now. Jesus, fuck. Karma. Instant karma. But we're so used to saying Cesaro that we're going to slip up and say Cesaro. It's just going to happen. But, even on this podcast, he's, JR said, Tony brought me out to do the main event of Raw. Remember last week on Raw where they had the blood and guts match in Detroit? Remember? That was Raw. I love good old JR. I'm just saying, good move. Anyway, enough of this. I've talked it to death. Let's go ahead and move on to the next. Motherfucker. The War Dog himself, Wardlow, had a huge championship win this week on Dynamite, winning the TNT title, confetti, the whole 9 yards. This was the anointing of Wardlow as the man. This is the start of big, big things and his push towards being a megastar. We all saw this coming, right? Wardlow is a talent that I think has a huge career ahead of him. He's at least a Batista level. I really do think that. He's getting better on the mic a little bit. I've just noticed from the interviews that he's been doing that, some of them started off really rough, like almost as bad as fucking Rex Steiner, Braun Breaker's interviews are the worst. But like Wardlow was pretty stiff and stale, and he's starting to kind of come out of his shell a little bit. Take a listen to this clip. Wardlow was on the Busted Open podcast with Dave LaGreca, and Mark Henry was there as well. And they interviewed Wardlow right after his big title win, and hear it from the man's mouth himself. How did he feel about winning the big one, or the medium-sized one? Check out this clip.
Well, take us back to Wednesday. So take us back to that moment. The match is over. You've won that championship. Like you said, you're getting buried in confetti. Like, what's going through your mind in that moment?
So actually, when Mark talking about watching it back, I did watch it back last night. And you can see when he counts 1, 2, 3 and the bell rings, you can genuinely see like this shocked look on my face, like this moment of realization of what just happened. Because I'm just so used to, at this point, I'm almost programmed, power bomb, foot on the chest, 1, 2, 3, arm raise, hit the corner, pose, leave. So this time I hit the 1, 2, 3, and then I'm like, why isn't he raising my arm? And then I was like, oh shit, he went to go grab the championship. That's mine now. And like, it just hit me like, holy shit, I just won the title. And you see it on camera actually just come over my face, that moment of realization. So God, that felt amazing. It just, there wasn't enough time for me to stand out there and celebrate with the fans, with the confetti and the pyros and the reception they gave me. I wanted to stand out there for another hour and absorb all that.
I love the humbleness from Wardlow. I love that he felt that shit. Like, he was genuinely emotional. He says the reaction on his face was his actual reaction, and that he didn't even sink in till he was waiting for the referee to hold his hand up, and he wasn't there, and he's like, oh shit, he's going to get my title. I want a fucking title. I want a title. That's how I would be. Like Liv Morgan, you see her when she's got that picture taken of her just like laying with the belt. Like, I'd be a fucking mark for the belt. Of course I would. Jesus Christ, I'm a belt mark as it is. If I was rich, I'd have a a copy of every single replica belt that they have. You know what I mean? I'd be buying them all. I'd be trying to collect real ones like Conrad. He's a big belt mark too. A lot of us are, right? Belts are cool as shit. So it's awesome that Wardlow appreciated that moment, and that he's, understands where he's at. He's being humble about it. Mark Henry's almost trying to tell him to not be humble. He's almost like, all right, now you're the man. Now people are going to start to check you and try you and push you a little bit. Now you got to kind of take your spot and be like, I'm the man. This is how it's going to go. How Mark Henry's kind of trying to coach him up. But I like that. I like that Wardlow's being humble. I like that he appreciates this. He fucking deserves it. Not in the sense that he's like the best talent in the world or anything. He's not setting the world on fire, but when you look at like the homegrown AEW talent, and there's a handful of them that they've pushed already, and then there's some that you're just like, you're looking at and you're like, this motherfucker's gonna be a star someday. I look at a Jade Cargill too, and she's another example. Like, she's green as shit still, but she has that, and that's why she's winning over fans. Not to turn this into the Jade Cargill clip, but same with Wardlow. This is why they're getting over. This is why they're getting the fan support, because the fans, not that they're not Bryan Danielson out in the ring or anything, and even Wardlow's promos are kind of meh, you know what I mean? But we see them getting better, and we've all been fans long enough to know what makes a star. And we can just one look at a Wardlow, at a Jade Cargill, and you're like, these motherfuckers are gonna be mega stars. The way that they're built, the way that they look, the way that they carry themselves, they just ooze star power, even if they don't have it all together yet. They're brand new to the business. They're fresh. They're green. They're only like a couple years in. Wardlow's got a little bit more indie experience, but we see them progressively getting better, even though they're not where they need to be yet. We can see like, okay, they're progressing, and they look the part, and they're homegrown, and we want to support that. We want to see the next megastar rise up, and this did have Goldberg-esque. He's got a lot of Goldberg, and they're doing it on purpose. The following Wardlow to, from the back hallways out to the arena. Clearly, when he had the security with him and stuff too, it was a different spin on the Goldberg presentation, but that's what they were trying to incite those vibes, you know what I mean? They were trying to kind of bring you there mentally without being a direct ripoff of it. And this win was similar to when Goldberg beat Raven for the United States Championship. Do you remember that? On WCW Nitro? Now, I'm not saying Wardlow is going to be the next Goldberg and he's going to be that huge of a megastar, but he certainly has that potential. You can't look me dead in the eye and say, no, that's never possible. You know what I mean? And this seemed like that first big step. Like Wardlow won his first championship. Goldberg, when he won his first championship, and it was fantastic. So, and it was just the next step of the rise. Wardlow's going to work his way up to a world title level, and when he does, like, I honestly see him becoming like a Batista level talent. I really do. He's got the body for it. I don't think he's not gonna be a Goldberg. I don't think he's gonna be like a Rock or anything like that. He doesn't have the personality or the charisma for it. But this interview on Busted Open was, I was surprised that, I remember the last time I listened to a Wardlow interview, which might have even been on Busted Open, he was a lot more rigid. Either just not used to it, he's a little kind of cold and awkward and quiet and giving like short answers and really making them work as an interviewer. When you got somebody that's an awkward interview, you got to kind of carry that shit, you know what I mean? And that's, I watched Sean Ross Sapp suffer through an interview with Braun Breaker one time. It was just like, oof, it was so rough, man, so rough. But, he'll come along, and Wardlow's coming along. He was more likable in this interview, more charismatic. He was more talkative. He just seemed more comfortable. I'm not saying he oozed megastardom necessarily in his charisma and his personality, but he was humble, he was kind, he was cool, and he seemed more relaxed and comfortable and more open to talking and just kind of in the hang of this kind of stuff now, and more comfortable in his own skin, because a guy coming up like Wardlow on a major platform, national TV, doesn't necessarily know how to, how do you play this role? Do I kayfabe necessarily? Do I talk in character all the time? Like, how do I present myself to the media? And I think he's figuring that out. And apparently, right before we wrap this up here on the Wardlow tip, apparently they also talked about, and I'd heard this in another, or saw it in an article or something out on the internets, that he did like a toy signing or just a signing in general at like a comic book store or some shit like that, and the line was like fucking ridiculous, way out the door. LaGreca said he was there, and that it was the longest line he'd ever seen for anybody at that particular store, and he'd been there for other wrestlers before. Wardlow Mania, I guess. I didn't even know that he was that over. But damn, good for him, and so far he deserves it, and I'm interested to see how much further he's gonna go. And just being such a long-term wrestling fan that I am, and I'm sure a lot of you can recognize the same thing, I see that star power in Warlow, and he's going to be a big, big deal in this business for years and years to come. Dutch Mantel is back in the podcast game. I recently just covered Dutch doing an interview talking about a knife fight he saw at a Waffle House with the Macho Man Randy Savage. You can go back and check out that clip. I'll link it here if you're listening to it in the clips. Otherwise, just go check it out on the YouTube feed. And apparently he's back in the podcast game. I thought it was like a one-off with this Wrestling Shoot Interviews channel. But apparently he's doing like a weekly thing, or he's got multiple episodes at least. And so I was perusing the YouTubes the other night, and I came across Dutch Mantel talking about the gathering of the Juggalos. This was super interesting, especially because I wrote a book about the gathering of the Juggalos, so I thought this would be a fun way to do a cheap plug and tie it into the podcast show. First, check out this clip.
Now, they were bad at throwing things, but if the clowns, if they ask them not to do something, they'll kind of pay attention to the two clowns. But anybody else, they didn't care. See, the clowns are like misfits in real life. They're really misfits, but you put them all together and they fit. So, but for me, they all like wrestling, and they were very, very nice to me. They were very nice to all the wrestlers, but they're fun to go to. I mean, you don't see any fights. Well, I didn't. You don't see any fights. You don't see anybody arguing. It's like all these misfits get together and they're all hugging each other and doing all this stuff. It's an odd festival to go to. And unless you know a little bit about the Juggalos history, you wouldn't understand it.
Yeah, The Gathering is fucking unreal. I did write a novel about it. It's called The Gathering, A Bold Journey into the Belly of the Juggalo Underworld. It's about a dude who was like a juggalo back in the day as a kid, grew out of it, got a life, and kind of hates juggalos and that kind of stuff now. And life falls apart for him, and he ends up somehow getting sucked back into going to one last gathering with his group of his buddies. And a bunch of drug-induced debauchery ensues. That is a novel. It's available on Amazon if you're into physical paperback copies. It'll be on your Kindle if you do the e-readers. And if you're an audio listener, it is on Audible as well. So that'll save me the plug at the end of the show. Links are down in the description, so if you are interested, you can go check it out. It has a bunch of 5-star reviews, so it's good and shit. Promise you. But anyway, yeah, Dutch's depiction of the gathering was very, very good. It's exactly what it's like, and he nailed it perfectly, and it was something that struck me too is he's like, if you were just didn't know what it was and you were dropped into the into the middle of the gathering, you would be horrified. You would think you were at hell on earth. So you really would. If you're just like some old hick fucker that just drives by this place and you see like a line of these freaks just getting ready to go into this gathering place, this festival, you're gonna cry. You're gonna call the cops. You're gonna think the apocalypse is coming. Like, it's scary. But if you know what it is, they're all just a bunch of chill fucking outcasts and freaks and weirdos having a good time for a few days. And they do lots and lots of wrestling there. They have it like every night that they have the show. It's like a 3-day festival, 4 days, something like that. They have wrestling every night. The Insane Clown Posse, huge wrestling fans, as you know, as they've been in WWF, WCW. They've been in, they run their own promotion, JCW, kind of once in a while. But every year they do the gathering, and they always bring in the big stars. And Dutch Mantel's been there probably a couple times, I imagine. Maybe just the once, I don't know. But it's always fun listening to Dutch talk too. I love Dutch Mantel. I'm so glad that he's doing more podcasts, because he was doing one. Oh, what was the name of the guy? The guy that does like the music and stuff for Something to Wrestle. He was doing a podcast with Dutch for a while too, and it was really good, because Dutch is a great storyteller. He's one of the best storytellers. I'd sit under fucking Dutch Mantel's learning tree all day long. He's another one. If I was building a dream booking team, I would want Dutch Mantel on there all day long. Dutch is the shit. So I highly recommend just listening to anything that Dutch has to say in general. But this was a fun little clip. I didn't listen to the full podcast, so I don't know what else he talked about on the episode. But just talking about the gathering kind of caught my eye because I got that book. So I thought it'd be a good little tie-in. And I will, if you're listening to the full podcast, I will save you the plug at the end of the show. And if you're only listening to the clip, gotcha. Go buy my book, bitch. We made it. We made it all the way to the end. You made it. You stuck with me this whole time. Props to you. Thank you so much. I appreciate the people that listen all the way to the end. If you are somebody that watches or listens to the full podcast. But I also appreciate people that just pop by and check out a clip or two. I love that shit. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you for giving me your time. I really do appreciate it. I'm struggling to find growth on YouTube right now. I'm trying, I upgraded to video. At some point I'm going to look into doing other things, like maybe, a different background, more professional, something like that, instead of just my fucking TV room or whatever. But look, man, I appreciate the people that do support me and follow me currently and that check me out every week. Thank you so much for your support. If there's anything that you can do, if you do like the show, please like, follow, and subscribe. If you haven't, please share it with your friends. Please spread the word. I'm going to keep trudging, man. I'm getting into the shorts and the clips and stuff, trying to get out on TikTok and then the YouTube shorts and stuff. I'm going to keep trying to reach that audience and get in the game. And I got a lot of other fun stuff coming up too. So please like, follow, subscribe on social media at Seth Grimes Media, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. Down below, hit the subscribe button here on YouTube if you're watching there. Or if not, you can just find the show on YouTube by searching for the Pro Wrestling Podcast or Seth Grimes Media. I appreciate all the support I can get. I got a donation link down below too. It's going to go into helping me continue to do the show. At some point, I want to be able to do this kind of stuff full time. Like I said, I'm doing other content too. I just did a tier ranking of all of the top 30 pro wrestling podcasts. Please check out that video. It's going to be linked at the end of this podcast. If it's the full podcast, for sure, it'll be at the end as like a bonus video to check out. It's fun. I rank all 30. Well, not all 30. There's a bajillion podcasts, but 30 of the top pro wrestling podcasts. I do the tier ranking gimmick that you see on YouTube. Already covered the book. Go check that out. Link down in the description. All those links are there. And then I got the NFTs, the Cryptomania NFT, the championship belts. They're dope as fuck. We got 30 pro wrestling inspired championship belts mashed up with crypto like Ethereum and Bitcoin and that kind of stuff. Dogecoin. Got the Dogecoin tag team championships. It's dope as fuck. I like them. I think they're fun. But, if you're into crypto and NFTs, the link is down below. If not, I appreciate you hanging out with me again. I dearly appreciate your support. I can't say it enough. I say it all the time, but I can't say it enough. I'm trying to grow, and you guys have been rock solid for me, and I very much appreciate it. With that said, I'm going to get the fuck out of here and go find something else to do, which is in all reality, it's going to be go sit at my computer and edit this shit and then upload it and all that boring stuff. This is the fun part of doing this show. The boring part, the work comes in when you got to go fucking edit the shit and you got to upload it. Uploading's a pain in the ass too and boring, but it's all part of the gig. But I really do, always appreciate just getting to hang out with you guys, sit here and just talk wrestling, dude. Peace, love, and pizza. I am your boy, Seth Grimes, and this has been the Pro Wrestling Podcast. Suck it, goddammit. Or you're fired. Had to do it again.